Our newest Anemo 5-star Catalyst character, Wander, adds a twist to typical hypercarry DPS by adding flight for airborne attacks and also providing spammable charge attacks at no cost stamina. Combining an easy to pick up playstyle, a minor learning curve to his dash efficiency, and relatively easy build paths, Wander provides a new playground for players interested in something different. YouTube frogs, welcome to a complete guide on Wanderer, previously Scaramouche, covering everything you need to know about the former 6th Harbinger. We'll be covering his talents in efficient detail, attack rotations and general playstyle advice, optimal weapons and artifacts, constellations, team building, and a gameplay showcase. Let's begin. From Constellation 0 to Constellation 6, Wanderer starts and remains a dedicated Anemo hypercarry. His on-field DPS time is centered around an airborne elemental skill ability, letting him fire off relentless waves of either minor AoE normal attacks or massive AoE charge attacks. His elemental burst is an extra nuke fired off every 1 to 2 rotations depending on team compositions and energy levels. With a short flat cooldown and active rotations, Wanderer is a fun twist on typical DPS action, providing you the upper hand in almost every situation. His active talents can be broken down as the following. Elemental skill is the focus of his kit, but not the best scaling talent. Enables his airborne stance and provides enhancements to both his normal and charge attacks, also allowing charge attacks to be spammed on no stamina cost. Normal attack talent is a standard multiple hit rotation with a nice AoE charge attack design. It is his best scaling and highest priority talent for general DPS. Elemental Burst acts as an extra nuke on applicable rotations. With medium level cost and cooldown at 60 to 15 seconds, it can be optimized around a 1 or 2 rotation use. Let's dive a bit deeper. Normal charge attacks. Wanderer's normal attack fires 3 wind blades that deal Anemo damage to the first enemy hit. They are mostly single target, but have a very small contact window for AoE damage. They have decent range and slight auto target on vertical enemies. His charge attack compresses a column of air, dealing AoE Anemo damage to any enemies hit. Both his normal and charge attack multipliers are attack percent based, and are decently strong comparatively to other Catalyst DPS. Elemental skill. Wanderer first deals AoE Anemo damage before ascending into his airborne state. A1 passive would activate here if Pyrohydro Electrocrow came in contact, leading to his Hexagon Jade emblem highlighting the elements to grant him corresponding buffs. Up to 2 can be active, 3 with Constellation 4. Hydra provides duration plus 20% or 2 seconds with natural decrease. Pyro grants attack plus 30%, Cryo grants crit rate plus 20%, and Electro grants 0.8 energy on average per hit. In this state, his normal attacks become minor AoE Anemo damage wind blades, and his charge attacks become slightly wider AoE Anemo damage explosions, both dealing a multiplicative percent of their multiplier values. Full duration of this ability lasts about 10 seconds, and he generates 1 Anemo orb on average every 2.5 seconds, for a total of 4 during the entire base duration. Cooldown is pretty short at 6 seconds, which counts down after his whole ability ends. Each elemental skill rotation has a roughly 16-second cycle, shorter if it ends early. A full duration N3 or N2 charge spam would get you about 17 total hits standing absolutely still. A full duration charge attack spam would get you about 13 charge attacks standing absolutely still and good timing. As you can see, charge attacks consume no stamina in this state, a unique feature that allows Wanderer to spam them with no drawback. Taking into his account his elemental skill scaling and also the scaling from his normal attacks, the total multiplier value DPS output for each of these attack rotations looks like so. N3 grants 2,668% over 17 hits. N2 charge provides 2,920% over 17 hits. And fully charge attack spamming grants 3,240% over 13 hits, all at level 6. While charge attack spam does have the theoretical highest DPS output, it's not always the best attack rotation given any situation. Depending on the team comp, weapon choice, and enemy layout, different attack rotations will have better practical DPS. That being said, this total multiplier value does not include the dashes from the Ascension 4 passive, which you use at your own discretion. Speaking of which, you may have noticed a sharper audio cue and a flash on Wanderer during these spams. This is the Ascension 4 passive, Gales of Reverie Descent effect activating. If Wanderer dashes while he's in midair, it will consume no additional flight points and summon 4 additional single target wind blades dealing 35% multiplier value each. Chance on each hit is 16%, scaled by 12% each time it does an effect. This is what that looks like visually. 83% of the time, you'll have descent within the first 4 hits before it resets. So on average, N3 dash is spammable. However, if you don't get a free dash, it is extremely punishing for his DPS. This is what N3 dash looks like. So personally, I prioritize saving his free dashes for dodging enemy attacks. If that's not necessary, then I'll just use his dash when I hear the audio cue on the next attack to cancel. I will say that it's situational whether dashing on cooldown is best DPS or not. Certain weapons increase your normal and charge attacks so much that dashing is suboptimal for DPS output, so preferably I stick with using them as a free dodge. Elemental Burst. Wanderer compresses an Anemo-infused black hole towards his enemies, dealing a very quick 5 instances of AoE Anemo damage. If he's in flying state while casting, his burst will stop the state. Pretty simple DPS ability with a pretty strong multiplier value, sitting at 60 energy and 15-second cooldown. By himself, he cannot self-sustain his own burst each rotation, so optimally you throw one at the end of every other flying cycle. With optimized supports and Anemo funneling, he can burst every rotation, but it shouldn't be forced. I would say a comfortable energy recharge line is 120 to 130% to enable 1 to 2 burst cycle, sometimes a 1 to 1 burst cycle. You'll need 150 to 180% recharge to be comfortable 1 to 1 burst cycle every time. Not recommended, as you'll be sacrificing too much of his raw damage. From near 0 energy and 123% energy recharge, this is a solo energy generation demo against the Cryo Regisvine. For Wanderer's talent priority, like I mentioned, normal attack talent scales the best even though his elemental skill is his core ability. It provides the largest scaling from raw multiplier value and scales into the multiplicative bonus from his elemental skill. Elemental skill provides more bonuses to his normal charge attacks but receives heavy diminishing returns at higher levels. From level 6 to 7, the return is just 2% for charge attacks and 2.5% for normal attacks. On principle though, it should be leveled in parallel with normal attack talent, but can be left alone after base investment. Elemental Burst is just raw burst damage multiplier, which is as important as often as he bursts. As a hyper carry, Wanderer ideally receives maximum talent investment for all skills, meaning level 8 for everything or higher. But for a general recommendation, I'd go normal attack over elemental skill greater than equal to elemental burst. Alright, let's build them up. As a hyper carry, Wanderer's best weapon choices are going to be those that provide highest DPS increases. The main focus should be one of 3 things. First, generic attack, 2, generic crit, and 3, Anemo or elemental or normal charge damage bonuses. These are all the same category when it comes to damage calc. We have 10 solid catalysts that fall under this category that I compared in a previous video. If you want to see exactly how they rank in different situations with common supports like Bennett or Faruzan, link in the description. For each weapon, I'll include whether there is an optimal attack rotation, out of normal spam or charge spam depending on their passives. 4-star Blackcliff. The most minimal of stat sticks for crit damage and attack percent, this weapon is the weakest choice amongst all viable choices. With 2 to 3 stacks on its passive, it is competitive with some common 4-star choices, but in my opinion, it's not worth to invest in. 4-star Eye of Perception. With just Wanderer and no supports, this weapon is fairly balanced. However, as you include proper supports and team comps, this weapon is marginally better than Blackcliff. 4-star Solar Pearl. Unfortunately, this is probably the most disappointing of the options. While it is still an easy choice for easy crit rate crit damage ratio, its damage cap, even in proper team settings, is only barely higher than Eye of Perception. Its passive only has a 60% uptime in the best situation, which leads it to fall behind in general. 5-star Congress Verity, the most minimal of stat sticks for crit damage in the 5-star category. It resembles Blackcliff, but with higher base stats. It's still useful in proper team settings as these high base attacks scale better with supports. So from here forward, we get to weapons that I'd expect to see on your Wanderer for proper builds. 4-star Dodoko Tails, an impressive 4-star weapon option. Please free event weapon using charge attack rotations outputs quite a nice amount of damage in all settings. The most surprising of the weapons I tested, the passive boost for charge attack does not lie. 5-star Memory of Dust. The non-shielded version falls off pretty hard, but in a practical team setting, I'd expect at least a Layla or a Zhongli with Memory of Dust Wanderer, bumping the shielded DPS to be nicely competitive with top 4 stars and average 5 stars. 4-star Witsith, a highly volatile 4-star weapon that has either a default stat stick or becomes one of the strongest catalysts in the game. On average, assuming all situations equal and 30 seconds inactive time accounted for, it's pretty good. 5-star Skyward Atlas. It's a great stat stick with a great passive and no ramp up time needed. Scales better with supports and doesn't matter which one. Can't go wrong with Atlas Wanderer. 5-star Lost Prayer. Ramp up time is needed, but on average you'll get 50% of the passive efficiency for his uptime. Accounting for this, it's still one of the best weapons to use for him, especially if you pair him with Bennett to make up for the lack of attack. Finally, 5-star Bell number 2. Ramp up time is needed, but on average it makes his normal attacks hit like an absolute truck and destroys the enemies. It's at least 10% better than all other weapons on average in practical team situations. Only with N3 spam though, and limit your dashes. They are DPS losses alongside using charge attacks. Now for artifacts and main stat choices. From Constellation 0 to Constellation 6, he wants just 3 things: DPS, more DPS, and even more DPS. Okay, to be serious though, attack, crit, anemo damage, elemental damage, normal charge damage. They're all good. Our best DPS choice is the new Desert Pavilion set. He gets a Nemo damage bonus, attack speed, and a normal charge increase. Dedicated Wanderer mains will definitely want to camp here for a bit. Other 4-piece choices, any normal charge boosting set. 4-piece Shimenawa's is pretty close to Desert Pavilion set, with the caveat of sacrificing energy for his autos. He can still burst at the end of his rotation with this set, and will almost always follow a 1 burst per 2 rotations. 4-piece Echoes if you're 30 ping or under, which is basically only those who live in Hoyoverse's basement. 4-piece Bull-Eyed set makes a return if you're running Shielded Wanderer. You'll need Layla or Zhongli to make this work. 4-piece Heart of Depth if you have a set laying around and don't mind the useless 2-piece Hydro. We also have some other niche 4-piece choices depending on the situation. 4-piece Blizzard Strayer can be used for a high crit damage Wanderer in Freeze team comps. His build will very much resemble Ayaka's in this situation, with high crit damage and possibly lacking an attack percent, so consider an attack percent weapon to balance his stats. 4-piece Viridescent Venerer. Even though Wanderer is designed as an Anemo hyper carry, he can still be used as a DPS version of an Anemo driver. Holding the 4-piece Viridescent Venerer makes him a solid slot in for the, you guessed it, good old national team comp. Bennett fitting, haha, from the attack buff, Qingqiu Burst, and Xiangling's Pyronado, which stays on the ground while he's airborne, are great synergies. Otherwise, his artifacts will resemble old school Xiao or Heizo, 2-piece Anemo or attack percent for general uses. He can either double up on 2-piece Anemo or double up on 2-piece attack, whatever grants him the best balance of stats for your situation. How about main stat choices? Very simple from C0 to C6. Standard DPS, attack timepiece, Anemo Goblet, and crit mask. This is about as textbook as it gets. Maintain your crit ratio at 1 to 2 and you're good to go. Attack Goblet is usable instead of Anemo, but it's about 50% efficient. Energy Recharge Timepiece over attack is adventurous for burst uptime. In my opinion, it's sacrificing too much raw attack for my liking. Now that all build basics have been covered, here's what I would recommend your stat thresholds be. In an absolute ideal world, you would have 150% attack, 80% crit rate, which gives you room for the Cryo plus 20% crit rate from Ascension 1 passive, 200 or higher crit damage, and 120 to 130 recharge. To start though, I'd recommend 120% attack, which I don't even have here, 70% crit rate, 150% crit damage, and 110% recharge. This, I would say, is bare minimum, and should be really easy to achieve if you have a crit weapon. It's a good starting point for you to improve all the stats to reach ideal world. Sending him to level 90 is not as cost efficient as other characters, as he only gains 1 substat worth of crit rate and a minor amount of base attack. But as a hyper carry, on principle, you should be maxing everything out for max investment. Constellations. So all of Wanderer's Constellations assist him in dealing slightly more damage. In my opinion, there's no gain that's too crazy here, even at C6. They're just moderate DPS increases for his overall playstyle and do incentivize certain attack rotations to make the most out of him. Constellation 1. Wanderer gains a default 10% attack speed for both his normal and charge attacks. Ideal N3 spam increases from 17 hits to 18 or 19, and ideal charge attack spam increases from 13 to 14. Obviously, this stacks with other sources of attack speed, further increasing his rotation hits. Also, his Ascension 4 dash hits gain a noticeable multiplier increase. The 25% that you see here is for each wind arrow, which are by default 35%. It's a total of 60% multiplier per wind arrow if you have Constellation 1. This incentivizes a lot more aggressive use of his dashes for increased DPS. Constellation 2. Wanderer's burst gains damage percent. The lower flying points he has, maximized at 50 out of 100 for 200% damage bonus. So you're incentivized to use his burst at the end of his rotation to gain the 200% boost. This 200% boost is unfortunately not multiplier based. It's equivalent to a Nemo damage bonus like a goblet. There's essentially 4 plus 20 Anemo Goblets worth of boosted damage just for his burst. C3 and C5, plus 3 levels to burst and skill respectively. Constellation 4. Wanderer gains a random Ascension 1 buff that was not activated on elemental skill activation. He can have at most 3 buffs with this constellation. Most notable from this is randomly getting the Cryo buff plus 20 crit rate when you're not running Cryo on the team. Constellation 6. Only when Wanderer spams normal attacks, not charge attacks, he gets basically a direct 40% damage boost. Each one of his normal attacks will gain another instance of damage equal to 40% of the original attack's damage, so it scales with normal attack talent level. His airborne duration is also effectively increased by 2 seconds, maintained at below 40 points so that his burst is always at the 200% threshold even if used early. If the additional hits are 0.1 second after the initial hit, And they also count towards his Ascension 4 dashes, meaning ideally he can have his free dodge up a lot more with C6. Overall, I think Constellation design is pretty solid and are moderately strong for C1, C2, and then C6 is a powerhouse upgrade. Team comps. So, here's the thing about Wanderer. In my opinion, he accesses some of the widest range of supports, shielders, healers, and off-field DPS currently. However, his damage output is limited by the nature of his design, an emo. He doesn't have access to the reactions that dominantly enhance his damage, so he must rely on his own multipliers and the base buffs from supports. So for this reason, his team building potential is high variance and can basically be a mixture of everything. He can, 1. Be built around single target DPS, enhancing his own and having off-field DPS supports that do the same. 2. Be built around AoE DPS with grouping enemies and taking advantage of charge attack spam. 3. Be built around his normal attack or catalyst driver synergy and combine a mixture of single target and AoE. There's one caveat to all of these ideas. Survivability is really important for the Wanderer. While he can dash or use spacebar to mitigate the effect of being knocked down, it can still be a tremendous loss of DPS due to not only his flight duration going down if not using his free dash, and also the animation time to get back up. For this reason, skill in dodging, or when that's not possible, shielding is highly valuable. Units like Layla and Zhongli have strong synergy with their long uptime shields and either synergy with normal attack, High Constellation Layla, or General Red Shred, Zhongli. Other generic shields like Diona, Toma, C4 Tank Fei have shield durations that last longer than Wanderer's 10-second duration. And while it's not necessary to have a shield, an interruption resist is also valuable for those pesky enemy situations where you're going to be hit by something, regardless of how much you dodge. Shielding can be nice. After survivability, we get to the most important Wanderer-specific support for his damage output. Faruzan. While I do highly recommend basically C6 Faruzan only, you can use her at low constellation. She's much clunkier though, and not nearly as easy to use or efficient to maintain burst uptime, so keep that in mind. Faruzan enhances all sources of damage, including crit at C6 for Wanderer, making her the all-in-one, most balanced support for him. Her passive grants a slight bit of a base attack transfer, and her burst grants a Nemo res decrease and a Nemo damage bonus, and then you have Constellation 6, which is 40% a Nemo crit damage. Besides Faruzan, Bennett is going to be the most universal support that everyone probably has for massive attack boost. After these team setups, we can flesh out the remainder of his lineup. If you're in need of AoE DPS, we have both Kazuha and Venti who work perfect with him. They both also happen to be Anemo characters who will benefit mutually from energy shared during their respective elemental skills. Venti works best against light enemies, and combined with Wanderer's chunked AoE, they can easily shred the HP of small waves. Kazuha works better in universal conditions, able to create a field of elemental swirls that Wanderer can fly in and focus fire enemies. In these types of setups, you're going to be using Wanderer's charge attack a lot more to take advantage of maximized AoE. If you're in need of single target DPS, we have both off-field single target supports as well as single target enhancers for Wanderer. For enhancers, we have Bennett and Yunjin. Bennett is a direct attack buffer, and Yunjin is normal attack ammunition, scaling off of Wanderer's crit and additional damage bonuses. Jean at Constellation 2 and Constellation 4 technically does count in this category, and receives just a soft mention because it's high Constellation Jean, and there's no way I would expect you to have that. Wanderer would be getting 15% attack speed from Constellation 2 and 40% Anemo res decrease during burst with her C4. For our off-field single target supports, we have Xingqiu, Yelan, Fischl. Xingqiu has more interrupt resist and solid off-field hydro DPS. Yelan has slightly less off-field hydro DPS, but does have a ramping Ascension 4 passive that increases Wanderer's DPS. Fischl is just Oz, off-field electro DPS available in both taser and aggravate situations. If you want to build around his normal attack or catalyst driver synergy and combine a mixture of single target or AoE synergies, then basically the rest of our off-field supports and general compositions are open. Wanderer can combine classic teams, like Nationals, Xingqiu, Xiangling, Bennett combo. He can be the on-field DPS for freeze teams, using high-value off-field supports like Rosario or Kaya with Xingqiu, Yelan, Kokomi, or Barbara. You can also replace Sucrose as a more DPS-oriented driver in classic taser situations with Beidou, Fischl, Xingqiu, or Dendro-related Bloom compositions like Hyper Bloom. And finally, if you want to maximize your Wanderer's damage and show off to your friends how powerful you are, not caring about proper rotations, then using the damage per screenshot supports are always open. Bennett, Mona, C6 Faruzan, and Constellation 4 Jean are a few of the options to show off your Wanderer. At the end of the day, his versatility is top-notch, and is a character more focused on his unique playstyle over improving the meta. Let's then take a look at some of these compositions. My Wanderer is running the Lost Prayer at R180 with a standard 2-piece Anemo attack combo focused on DPS substats. Cue the music, Mr. Cope. And that about sums things up. I personally quite enjoy his playstyle and think it adds a little bit of pizzazz to the usual DPS rotations. Getting staggered in the air is a bit annoying, but that's a user issue, so it's fine. I've also been enjoying his helicopter-like exploration speed and free aerial coverage. Overall, he can't match the usual high DPS units you know and love, but that's mostly because Anemo DPS are capped in what their reactions enable for their personal damage. I think he makes the most out of someone who has a wide roster of available team members, and adds a different engaging playstyle for those looking for something new to try out. That wraps up all my general findings and concludes my series of general info videos on Wanderer. Really appreciate all your support, and if you made it to the end, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.